Welcome back to Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. As always, it is so great to be back in the studio sharing the podcast with you. We are just kind of coming into the second week of January, and it feels like a lot has happened already in the new year. It feels like there's a lot happening in the world right now. And, as yoga teachers, we play such an important role in our communities as like community gatherers. We're kind of like the stewards of those third spaces that so many people need and rely on. And I just want to say that I think it's more important than ever that we keep doing what we're doing and showing up for ourselves and our own practices, and also showing up for our students. And, every year, like with January, it always brings kind of like an influx of people coming back to class. And in my classes especially, I noticed that, folks who maybe used to come to classes and then like life happened and, work schedules didn't align anymore, like maybe I didn't see them for a few months, they kind of like come back in January. So it's always really nice to see those familiar faces back in class, and just to kind of like feel the energy of January. Like I love when things are really busy, and classes are definitely busy right now. I taught a really fun pop-up vinyasa yoga class this past Friday, and it was honestly just a chance for me to like play a really fun music playlist and have everybody know that like when they were signing up for the class that that's what they were getting themselves into. So that went really well. And yeah, things are busy. Things are busy right now, but in a good way. And last week I mentioned that we were going to start off the year with a 4-part podcast series about what sustainability looks like for yoga teachers in the year 2026. So I'm really interested in exploring what's required for yoga teachers to make a living doing the work that we genuinely care about while managing our energy and keeping the well-being of ourselves and our communities at the forefront. And over time, I know for sure that sustainability has emerged as a really big theme in the work that I do. And it's not necessarily something that was intentional at first. It happened out of necessity. So in last week's episode, which was part 1 of this series on sustainability for yoga teachers, we zoomed out and we looked at some of the cultural and societal systems and expectations that often lead to burnout for yoga teachers. And in this series, one of the ways that I see sustainability is as an antidote to burnout. So by keeping sustainability at the forefront of our work, we can kind of like prevent that inevitable burnout that so many yoga teachers experience. And then in part 1 of the series as well, we did some reflection and we really took some time to get clear and find clarity on what is going really well right now for us in our yoga businesses. We considered what needs to shift or change in order to stay. And we also looked at, if there's anything that we need to kind of step away from or let go of to move into the new year. So with that being said, today's episode is part 2 of our 4-part series. And this episode is all about capacity. So I think that considering your own capacity is one of the key pillars that's going to really inform the sustainability of your work as a yoga teacher. And today we are asking ourselves, what am I actually available for in this season of my work? If you've ever experienced burnout, you might think that you have a self-care problem. And I think that self-care can be part of the bigger picture. Often it's a piece of the puzzle when it comes to burnout. And that puzzle piece is that we've neglected some of our own needs and we've overworked ourselves at the expense of our well-being. But I think that one of the things that we can do to help ourselves is to actually get really honest about what our capacity is. So rather than saying like, oh, I just like neglected my self-care and I need to meditate more and I need to take more bubble baths and I need to get more massages, like, no, like that can all be part of it. But like at the root of the issue, what is your capacity right now? And so when you think about your capacity as a yoga teacher, I like to think of it as how much space do I have available in my body, in my mind, in my spirit, in my life, to hold space for others and to teach and to do all of the other things required in order to make that happen. So like all of the class prep, the marketing, the driving, right? Everybody, that looks different for every teacher. And I have to think about all of that in relationship to all of the other things in my life outside of teaching that require my care and my attention. And so it's important to remember that your capacity is contextual and it's fluid, right? So it's based on the context, it's based on a lot of different factors, and it's going to evolve and change over time. So it changes with age, it changes with health, with injury, with finances, grief, caregiving, creativity, your life circumstances, where you're located geographically. Like, there are endless factors that can influence your capacity as a yoga teacher. And your capacity, because it's something that changes, right, all the time, is not some sort of a moral issue that you need to fix. So if you are in a season where your capacity is less than what it used to be, maybe it's less than what it was this time last year, it doesn't mean that you are less devoted or that you're less disciplined, right? And I think that so many of us have found ourselves in certain points of our teaching careers where perhaps we're kind of like overriding our limits when it comes to teaching. And I do want to acknowledge why this seems to be something that's quite common. So first is that many of us are drawn to teaching yoga because we're really sensitive people. So you might consider yourself to be like a feeler. So somebody who feels really deeply, somebody who has a lot of empathy, somebody who picks up on what other people are feeling really easily. You might be someone who wants to help a lot, somebody who wants to take care of others. Maybe you grew up with the mindset that like your selflessness and like self-sacrifice will be rewarded and that this is like a positive quality and that you should put others first. And so I think that lends itself towards like a lot of people-pleasing tendencies among yoga teachers. And I'm generalizing, like this isn't going to be the case for everyone, but it is something that I've observed. And I think that this is pretty common, right? So at the expense of ourselves and our energy, our well-being, maybe we say yes to things because we don't want to disappoint someone, right? Even though in reality, we should be saying no because our capacity for whatever that is just isn't there. The second reason is that the yoga industry seems to reward over giving and overextending yourself. So if you're the yoga teacher who's always available and always says yes to everything and is always there, like ready to go, as a sub, for example, like that's so valuable and that's great. And you will probably get more opportunities and you might be picked more for things because you're just always there. But typically, always saying yes to things and always being available and just, over giving will probably cost you in the long run. And then third, the reason why I think this happens is that there isn't a ton of honest conversation out there around money or exhaustion or like how our varying capacities throughout different phases of our lives influence our ability to do our work. And there are aspects of our work itself as yoga teachers that are going to impact our capacity. So things like teaching multiple classes back to back or having like a stacked day of teaching where you're driving all over the place and you're driving to like different cities in one day to teach, that can really impact you. I mentioned this last week, like teaching in environments where it's really demonstration heavy and you're really relying on your physical body to like do all of the poses and show everything to everyone. Like that's going to take a toll eventually. Pushing through and teaching while you're sick or while you're injured. And that happens because like we're contractors and typically we don't have paid sick days as yoga teachers. So a lot of times you're presented with the choice of like push through and teach while I'm sick, but get paid for it, or cancel because I'm sick, but don't get paid. And then, we're afraid to say no to things as well because maybe we're worried about losing students or disappointing the place that we work or kind of losing like favor with the place that we work. And so when your income depends on your body, especially like showing up and being ready to perform and do all of the things, that pressure to override your capacity becomes really, really big. And so I'm just acknowledging this because it's something that I see a lot. It's something that I've experienced myself. And this is where we start to lose the sustainability of our work. And this is where we kind of disregard that signal that like maybe we need to do less or maybe we need to say no. So when we're thinking about capacity and what that means for us as yoga teachers, I think that it's helpful to think about your capacity as something that is seasonal. So that means that your capacity is not always going to stay the same. It's also not always going to steadily increase or steadily decrease. It's probably something that is going to fluctuate. And I want to give you some examples to encourage you to start thinking about what season you might be in right now. And maybe some of my examples will resonate with you and you're like, yes, that is the season that I'm in right now. Or maybe these examples will just inspire you to come up with a name for your own season if you can. So you might find yourself stepping into what you might consider a season of expansion. And so this could be a time where you are taking on more responsibility. It could be a time where you are adding more classes to your schedule, or maybe you are branching out into different types of teaching, or you're adding on to like the types of offerings that you already have. You could be in a season of consolidation and simplicity. You might be in a time where you're trying to keep things a little bit more focused and a little more contained. So maybe you are stepping away from something that wasn't working anymore, and you're just focusing your energy on like something specific, or maybe just that one thing that is going really well. You might be in a season of study where maybe you've committed to a training, and in order to be in that training or go off like on the journey that you're going on, if you need to travel somewhere for it, maybe you've had to let go of some of your classes or all of your classes. And with that, there can be some uncertainty of like, will those classes be there for me when I'm finished? This training or this learning that I've embarked on. Those seasons of study can also be really devotional, where you're like really deep in the work that you're doing, and you kind of go into like almost a hermit mode, I want to say. Like, I've definitely experienced that before. And you're not necessarily able to give time to like being out in the world and like out with other teachers and taking classes and running events and workshops. It's like you're kind of going inwards, right? And you're doing that self-study. So maybe that's a season that you're in right now. You might be in a season of rest. So it could look like saying no to traveling, saying no to subbing. You might be pulling back from social media a little bit. Maybe you're even like taking temporary breaks from social media. You might be investing more into your own practices, like more energy into your own practices. You might be less available emotionally, digitally, like schedule-wise, okay? And those seasons are definitely important to take care of ourselves. You may also be in a season of visibility where you are building an intentional presence. So maybe you are guest teaching more. Maybe you're offering more workshops. You're sharing your voice through writing, through podcasting. You're more active on social media. You're letting yourself be seen as an authority. You're sharing more thought leadership or sharing your perspective on things, even if, it might be polarizing. And there are definitely seasons where my capacity is expansive and I have space to create and teach and travel and record and lead and show up for people. And there are other seasons where I have to drop classes, I have to say no to things, and I have to keep my work really simple and more contained. So when it comes to considering your current capacity, it's really important to acknowledge the season that you're actually in right now, rather than trying to fit into the season that you used to be in, or like fit into the season that you think you should be in. Okay, so this is a chance for you to reflect and think about that. And I also think that acknowledging like the season of your capacity is a really powerful way for you to live your yoga practice, because this is something that we see in our students as yoga teachers quite often, where students will get really attached to like a pose that they used to be able to do, or the way that their body used to be able to move with ease. And maybe they're aging and they're like, oh, this is so frustrating. Like, I used to be able to do this and it was so easy and now I can't do it. And as yoga teachers, we're going to tell them that's okay. And like part of the practice is actually letting go of things, especially as you get older, right? And we might decide like, cool, I used to do that pose and my time with it has passed, and like, I'm going to drop it and do something else. And we have to extend that same compassion and understanding to ourselves as teachers, that your capacity might not be what it used to be, and that it doesn't mean that it's forever, but we have to honor it, right? We can't push past that. So what I want to do is, for this series and for part 2 of this series is I want to offer you some space to take an inventory of your capacity right now. So last week we reflected on some big picture questions, and today we're going to get like a little bit more refined and a little bit more personal with it. So this is a really good point to pause the episode if you want to go grab a pen, a piece of paper, something to write with if you like listening to this as a journaling exercise. And you can also simply reflect on the questions if you're listening while you're like walking or driving to work. So the first sort of set of questions that I want to bring to the table are questions that relate to your physical body and your energy levels, okay, in relationship to your capacity. And the idea is to help you get clear on like where you're at right now. So the first question that you can ask yourself is, at the end of my teaching day, how does my body feel? Do I feel energized? Is it just kind of a neutral feeling? Or do I feel depleted? So take a moment to tune into that and ask yourself, like, what am I actually feeling in my body when I'm finished teaching? I also want you to consider, where might I be pushing through some signals from my body or my mind that I would never encourage a student to ignore? So is there anywhere where you're experiencing maybe a little bit of a double standard? And then another question that you should ask yourself is, if my teaching load stayed exactly the same as it is right now for the next 2 years, how would my body feel? Okay. So give yourself a little bit of time to reflect on those. Feel free to pause the episode and write if you're journaling. And like I did last week, I'll share some of my own reflections as well, because I'm really like right here with you on this journey. Oh, here comes Waylon. If you're watching on YouTube right now, he likes to join for my podcasts. Yeah. So, when I'm thinking about like my physical body when it comes to teaching and energy levels and whatnot when it comes to teaching, a long time ago, I used to teach tons of classes per week. I've talked about this before. And I also taught blocks of classes, so like 3 classes in a row, in a heated room where I needed to demo everything. Like that was just how it went at that studio. And teaching that way really impacted my body and my energy levels. I had so much fatigue after teaching. Like I was just so depleted and so tired. And the reason that it affected me so much was because I actually wasn't able to keep up with my body's energy needs. Like I was teaching a ton, I was sweating a ton, I was teaching not just yoga, but also like yoga fitness, like fusion type classes at the time. So like I was working out a lot and using up a lot of energy. But the problem was that I was so tired when I would get home from teaching, like I couldn't even be bothered to cook or eat anything. And that was a really not a good issue. And so when I consciously made the shift away from teaching tons of public classes towards pretty much exclusively teaching pre-registered yoga classes, that gave me my energy back, and that gave me like my health and my well-being back again. And it lets me teach in my own way, which is primarily verbal. I know that everybody has their own thoughts about this, but for me, like teaching and practicing are completely separate. And so when I show up to teach yoga, I am there to be of service to the students who are in the room in front of me. I am there to connect with them, to watch them in their practice, to offer them suggestions and encouragement. And in order to do that, I need to teach pretty much verbally the whole time, unless I'm showing them something specific with my body. And that is one of the ways that I'm able to kind of take care of myself, reduce my risk of injury. And when I leave teaching these days, I leave feeling energized or just like regulated, but never depleted. So if my schedule stayed the same, I would be happy with that because my energy levels are taken care of, my body is taken care of. That increases my capacity for other things. I want to move into some questions to help you reflect on the season of your capacity right now and to get really honest about that. So the first question is, what season of my life am I actually in right now? So not the season I wish I was in, but what season am I actually in? And can you come up with a name for it? Is there anything that I'm trying to sustain that was only meant to be temporary? Okay, so is there anything that I've been kind of doing for too long or pushing through for too long? And then what would be like a right-sized schedule for me in this season? What would that look like? And it doesn't have to be forever, but for right now, what would that ideal schedule look like for you? And again, I'm going to keep sharing reflections on, the season that I think I'm in right now. And I think that the best way I can describe the season that I'm in is a season of intentional visibility and leadership. And the intentional visibility really is through the podcast. I'm stepping into public thought leadership through Yoga Insider. I am naming some of the systemic issues in the yoga industry without being afraid to talk about it, without apologizing about it. And I'm letting myself be seen as like a teacher's teacher right now, because I know that that's true, and I'm not going to try to hide it or pretend to downplay what it is. So that feels like the phase that I'm in right now. And it's a lot. It's a lot to be seen and to put yourself out there. And part of that is just letting my work circulate globally and letting myself be visible globally rather than only locally. So that's the phase. That's the phase right now. And it's definitely a phase that is stretching me, but I know that it is all for the greater good. I've about 3 more questions for you. So again, feel free to pause the episode. But my next question that I want you to consider is, who do I think I have to be in order to be taken seriously as a yoga teacher? Is there a past version of myself that I'm still trying to be, even if that version doesn't fit who I am anymore? And is there anything that I would change if I trusted that my value isn't tied to my output? Is there anything that I would change if I trusted that my value is inherent? So take your time. Big questions. Big questions today. And before we close, I'll just take a moment to recap what we've explored so far. So in part 2 of this 4-part series on sustainability, we are considering our personal capacity as yoga teachers. So we talked about how sustainability isn't a self-care issue. It's actually about getting really honest with your capacity during this particular phase or season of your life. We explored why yoga teachers in particular seem really susceptible to overriding our limits and how overgiving is rewarded in our industry, how silence around money or being depleted can keep people kind of isolated. We talked about teaching in seasons and designing your work around reality, around your reality right now. So your body, your energy, what's going on in your life, the needs of the people around you. And then finally, I offered an inventory to help you get a little more clear and a little more honest on your capacity and identity as a yoga teacher right now. So if this episode resonated, I would love for you to share it with another yoga teacher. Maybe there's somebody who needs permission to slow down or do things a little bit differently. So feel free to send the episode to someone else. And if you're finding value in Yoga Insider, if you leave a review or a rating for the podcast, that is one of the most simple things that you can do to support this work and help it reach more yoga teachers around the world who are craving thoughtful and honest conversations about the work that we do as yoga teachers. So once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to Yoga Insider. I'll see you next time.